The train lurched to a halt with such force that Dorothy Zimmerman gripped the worn wooden seat beneath her, certain this rattling metal beast would be her tomb before she ever laid eyes on the man whose letters had promised her a new life in Colorado territory. Through the dust-smeared window, she saw Salida for the first time, and her heart sank like a stone in deep water. It was 1878, and the small mining town sprawled across the Arkansas River Valley looked nothing like the Philadelphia streets she had left behind 3 weeks ago. Rough wooden buildings lined a wide dirt road where horses and wagons kicked up clouds of dust that seemed to hang in the afternoon air like fog. Men with guns strapped to their hips walked freely, their hard eyes scanning everything with the wariness of wolves. Dorothy pressed a trembling hand to her chest, feeling her heart hammer against her ribs as though trying to escape the cage of her body. She had known it would be different. The letters from Isaac Grayson had been honest about the frontier life, about the challenges and the isolation. But seeing it, breathing in the dry mountain air that tasted of dust and pine and something wild she could not name, made every word of warning real in a way that ink on paper never could. "Salida Station," the conductor called, his voice rough as gravel. "Anyone disembarking, best do it now." Dorothy stood on legs that felt as sturdy as water, smoothing down her traveling dress of deep blue wool. It was too heavy for the warm September afternoon, but it was her finest dress, and she wanted to make a good impression. Her hands shook as she gathered her carpet bag and the small trunk that held everything she owned in this world. The platform was rough-hewn planks that creaked under her feet. She stood there as the train pulled away with a shriek of steam and metal, feeling suddenly very small and very alone. Around her, the town bustled with activity that seemed chaotic and dangerous. A gunshot rang out somewhere in the distance, and Dorothy flinched so hard she nearly dropped her bag. "You all right there, miss?" A weathered woman in a faded calico dress paused beside her, concern creasing her sun-browned face. "I am looking for Isaac Grayson," Dorothy managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "He is expecting me." The woman's expression softened. "Ah, you are the bride from back east. Isaac mentioned you might be arriving soon. He is probably at his ranch outside town, but I am sure he will be here shortly. He checks the train schedule regular-like." She patted Dorothy's arm with a work-roughened hand. "Name is Margaret Wells. My husband and I run the general store. You come find me if you need anything, you hear?" "Thank you," Dorothy said, grateful for even this small kindness. Margaret nodded and continued on her way, leaving Dorothy alone again on the platform. She watched the street, trying to calm her racing heart. A group of cowboys rode past, laughing loudly at some joke she could not hear. Their horses were enormous beasts that looked like they could trample a person without even noticing. Everything here seemed designed to remind her how far she was from the safe, orderly world she had known. She had grown up in Philadelphia, the daughter of a bookkeeper who had died of pneumonia 2 years ago, leaving her and her mother with debts they could never hope to repay. Her mother had passed 6 months later, her heart simply giving out, the doctor had said. Dorothy knew it was grief and worry that had killed her as surely as any disease. At 22 years old, Dorothy had found herself alone in a city that cared nothing for a woman with no family and no prospects. The advertisement had appeared in the newspaper like an answer to a prayer she had been too afraid to speak aloud. Rancher in Colorado territory seeking educated woman for marriage. Must be of good character and willing to embrace frontier life. She had responded with a letter written by candlelight in the tiny room she rented, pouring her situation onto the page with as much dignity as she could muster. Isaac Grayson's response had come 3 weeks later. His handwriting was strong and clear, his words measured and kind. He had been honest about the hardships, but also about his hopes for a family, for a partnership built on mutual respect. They had exchanged 6 letters over 4 months, and with each one, Dorothy had felt the first stirrings of hope she had known since her parents died. But hope seemed a fragile thing now, standing in this wild place where danger felt as present as the dust that coated everything. Dorothy Zimmerman. She turned at the sound of her name and found herself looking up at the tallest man she had ever seen. He stood at least 6 feet 4 inches, with broad shoulders that strained the fabric of his work shirt and arms corded with muscle. His face was tanned from years under the sun, with strong features and eyes the color of storm clouds. A hat sat on his head, shading those eyes, and a bandana hung around his neck. He looked powerful and capable and utterly intimidating. "Yes," she managed, her voice coming out small and frightened. "Are you Isaac Grayson?" "I am." He removed his hat, revealing dark hair that fell across his forehead. His expression was serious but not unkind. "I apologize for not being here when the train arrived. One of my horses threw a shoe, and I had to walk him back slower than I planned." "It is quite all right," Dorothy said, though her hands were still shaking. She clasped them together to hide the tremor. Isaac's eyes moved over her face and she saw something shift in his expression. Concern, perhaps. "The journey was hard, long," she said carefully, "but I managed." He nodded slowly. "I can see you are frightened." The directness of the statement caught her off guard. She had been trying so hard to hide her fear, to present herself as brave and capable. Tears stung her eyes and she blinked them back furiously. "I am sorry. I do not mean to seem ungrateful. It is just all so different from what I am accustomed to." Isaac was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes studying her. Then he stepped closer, not touching her but close enough that she could smell leather and sage and horse on him. "Dorothy, I am going to make you a promise right now, and I mean it with everything in me. I will keep you safe. Always. This land can be harsh, and there are dangers here that you have never had to think about back east. But you are under my protection now, and I do not take that lightly." The sincerity in his voice made her throat tight. "You do not even know me." "I know enough," he said quietly. "I know you are brave enough to leave everything familiar behind for a chance at something better. I know you are educated and thoughtful from your letters. And I know that you are scared right now, which is the most sensible thing a person could be in your situation." He held out his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she placed hers in it. His palm was rough and warm, completely engulfing her smaller hand. "We are going to take this slow. You are going to learn this place, and I am going to teach you how to be safe here." "All right." Dorothy felt something in her chest loosen just slightly. "All right." He gave her hand a gentle squeeze before releasing it. "Let me get your things, and we will head to the ranch. It is about 5 miles outside town. Do you ride?" "Ride." The word came out higher than she intended. "Horses," he clarified, and there was the faintest hint of amusement in his eyes now. "No, I have never been on a horse in my life." "Then you will ride in the wagon." He collected her trunk as though it weighed nothing and hefted it onto one broad shoulder. "Come on. The wagon is just over here." Dorothy followed him across the dusty street, her eyes darting nervously at every sound. 2 men were arguing loudly outside a saloon, their voices carrying clearly in the afternoon air. A woman in a bright red dress called out something from a second-story window, and several cowboys whistled in response. Dorothy kept her eyes fixed on Isaac's broad back, using him as a shield between herself and this chaotic new world. The wagon was simple but sturdy, pulled by 2 large horses that made Dorothy's stomach clench with nervousness just looking at them. Isaac secured her trunk in the back, then offered his hand to help her up onto the bench seat. His grip was steady and strong, and he lifted her up as easily as if she weighed nothing at all. He climbed up beside her, and the wagon creaked under his weight. Taking up the reins, he glanced at her. "Hold on to the side there. The road can be rough." Dorothy gripped the wooden edge of the seat as Isaac clicked his tongue and the horses started forward. The wagon jolted and swayed over the uneven ground, and she found herself sliding sideways on the bench. Isaac's arm came out, steadying her without a word. "Thank you," she murmured. They left the town behind, following a road that wound through grassy valley land with mountains rising on either side. The peaks were enormous, capped with snow even though it was September. Pine forests climbed the slopes, and the Arkansas River glittered in the distance, running swift and cold over rocks. It was beautiful in a way that made Dorothy's chest ache, but it was also vast and empty in a way that terrified her. "How far to the nearest neighbor?" she asked, breaking the silence. "About 3 miles. Frank and Sarah Morrison have a spread to the north. Good people. Sarah will be happy to have another woman nearby. 3 miles. Back in Philadelphia, you could not walk 3 blocks without passing a dozen homes. Here, 3 miles separated one family from another. What about town? How often do you go to Salida?" "Once a week usually, sometimes twice if needed. We get supplies, check for mail, that sort of thing." He glanced at her. "It is isolated out here, Dorothy. I will not lie to you about that. But the ranch has everything we need. Cattle, horses, good water from the creek that runs through the property. We have chickens for eggs, and I keep a vegetable garden in the warm months. It is a good life, just different from what you know. Are there Indians?" The question burst out before she could stop it, and she immediately felt foolish, but Isaac did not seem offended. "The Ute people have a reservation west of here. We see them sometimes, trading in town. They have been pushed out of most of their land." His voice carried a note of sadness. "There are occasionally conflicts, but mostly things are peaceful now. The real dangers are more likely to be wild animals. We have mountain lions, bears, wolves. That is why I do not want you wandering off alone until you learn the land. Mountain lions, bears, wolves." Dorothy felt her fear settling deeper into her bones. "Hey," Isaac's voice was gentle. "Look at me." She turned to face him, and his gray eyes held hers steadily. "I meant what I said. I will keep you safe. I have been living in this territory for 8 years, and I know how to read the land, how to spot danger before it becomes a problem. You stay close to me until you learn what to watch for, and you will be fine. I promise you that." "Why did you come here?" Dorothy asked. "To Colorado, I mean." "Most people want to move away from places like this, not toward them." A shadow crossed his face. "I grew up in Kansas on a farm. My father was a hard man, quick with his fists and his temper. When I was 19, I left and never looked back. Drifted west working cattle drives, saved my money, and eventually bought land here. I wanted space where a man could breathe, where he could build something that was his own." He paused. "I am 30 now, and I have been alone for most of those years. Started wanting something more than just work and empty rooms." "So you sent for a mail-order bride," Dorothy said softly. "So I sent for a partner," he corrected. "Someone to build a life with. The ranch is doing well, Dorothy. I am not a rich man, but we will have enough. What I could not give myself was companionship, conversation, someone to share the good days and the hard ones." His jaw tightened. "I know you did not come here out of love for me. Your letters were honest about your circumstances. But I am hoping that over time we can build something real between us." Dorothy felt a lump form in her throat. "I will try to be a good wife to you, Isaac. I can cook and clean and keep a house. I may not know anything about ranching, but I can learn. I have no doubt about that." He smiled, the first real smile she had seen from him, and it transformed his face, making him look younger and less severe. "But right now, I just want you to not be so terrified you are about to jump out of your own skin." Despite herself, Dorothy felt her lips quirk in the tiniest smile. "I am not sure that is possible at the moment. We will work on it." They rode in silence for a while longer, the only sounds the creak of the wagon, the steady clip of the horses' hooves, and the whisper of wind through the grass. Dorothy found herself watching Isaac from the corner of her eye. He sat easily on the bench, his body swaying with the motion of the wagon, clearly comfortable in this environment that felt so alien to her. His profile was strong and handsome, she admitted to herself. The letters had not prepared her for how physically imposing he would be, but there was a gentleness in how he spoke to her that made her think perhaps she had not made a terrible mistake in coming here. "There," Isaac said, pointing ahead. "That is the ranch." Dorothy looked and saw a homestead nestled in a valley with mountains rising behind it. The main house was built of logs, larger than she had expected, with a covered porch across the front. Beyond it stood a barn, a corral with horses moving inside it, and several other outbuildings. Cattle dotted the hills in the distance, dark shapes against the golden grass. A creek sparkled in the afternoon sun, winding through the property. "It is bigger than I imagined," she said honestly. "I have been building it up for years. The main house has 4 rooms, and I added the porch last summer. The barn is solid and the land is good. We have about 300 head of cattle right now." As they drew closer, Dorothy could see the details more clearly. The house looked sturdy and well-maintained, the porch railings smooth and even. Flowers grew in wild profusion around the foundation, purple and gold and white. "Did you plant those?" she asked, nodding toward the flowers. Isaac looked almost embarrassed. "My mother loved flowers. She never got to have them much because my father said they were a waste of time. When I built this place, I figured I would plant some in her memory." He cleared his throat. "I know it probably looks rough to you compared to a city house." "No," Dorothy said quickly. "It looks like a home." Something in Isaac's expression softened at her words. He pulled the wagon up in front of the house and set the brake before jumping down. He came around to her side and held up his hands to help her down. Dorothy placed her hands on his shoulders, and he gripped her waist, lifting her down as easily as if she were a child. For just a moment, she was pressed close to him, feeling the solid strength of his body, and her breath caught. Isaac stepped back quickly, as though he had felt the same jolt of awareness. "Let me show you inside." He carried her trunk up onto the porch, and Dorothy followed, her skirts swishing against the wooden planks. The front door was heavy wood, and it swung open on well-oiled hinges. The interior of the house was simple but clean. They entered directly into the main room, which served as both kitchen and living area. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a black stove for cooking nearby. A wooden table with 4 chairs sat in the center of the room, and there was a comfortable-looking armchair near the fireplace. Windows on 2 walls let in plenty of light, and the floors were made of smooth wooden planks. "The bedroom is through there," Isaac said, pointing to a door on the right. "There is a guest room on the other side for when we have visitors, or—" He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "Or for you to use until you are ready to share a room with me. I will not pressure you about that, Dorothy. We can take our time with the personal side of marriage." Dorothy felt her cheeks heat but managed to nod. "Thank you for being considerate. The other room is my office where I keep the ranch records." He set her trunk down beside the table. "Are you hungry? I imagine it has been a while since you ate." Now that he mentioned it, Dorothy realized she was famished. "Yes, actually. I had some bread and cheese this morning on the train, but that was many hours ago. Sit down, and I will get something together." Isaac moved to the kitchen area with surprising ease for such a large man. He stoked the fire in the stove and pulled out bread, cheese, cold meat, and some apples. Within minutes, he had laid out a simple meal on the table. Dorothy sat and ate gratefully, the food plain but good. Isaac sat across from her, watching her with those serious gray eyes. "I know this is all overwhelming," he said after a while. "I remember when I first came west, everything felt wrong. Too big, too empty, too dangerous. But you get used to it. More than that, you start to appreciate it. The freedom here, the space to breathe, the way you can see the stars at night without any city lights blocking them out." He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "I will teach you, Dorothy, how to handle yourself out here, how to read the signs of danger, how to live in this place. You will not always feel so afraid." "I want to believe that," she said quietly. "Then believe it. I do not say things I do not mean." After they finished eating, Isaac showed her the rest of the house. The bedroom was simple but comfortable, with a large bed covered in quilts, a wardrobe, and a washstand. The window looked out over the creek and the mountains beyond. "It is a beautiful view," Dorothy said, staring out at the landscape painted gold by the late afternoon sun. "I am glad you think so." Isaac's voice came from behind her. "I will bring your trunk in here. You can unpack and rest if you want. I need to go check on the animals and do the evening chores. Will you be all right alone for a bit?" Dorothy turned to face him, fighting down the surge of panic at the thought of being alone in this strange place. "Yes, I will be fine." He looked at her for a long moment, as if he could see right through her brave words to the fear beneath. "I will only be in the barn. You can see it from the window. If you need anything, just step out on the porch and call for me. I will hear you." "All right." Isaac left, and Dorothy heard the front door close behind him. She stood in the bedroom in this house that was now supposed to be her home and tried to calm her racing heart. Through the window, she watched Isaac walk to the barn, his long stride confident and sure. He disappeared inside, and she felt suddenly very alone. She forced herself to open her trunk and begin unpacking. Her dresses, her undergarments, her few books, and the small leather case that held her mother's jewelry. Each item she put away felt like another step toward accepting that this was real, that her old life was truly gone and this new one was all she had. When she had finished, she went back to the main room. Through the window, she could see Isaac in the corral, working with one of the horses. Even from this distance, she could see the easy confidence with which he moved, the way the horse responded to him. He was completely in his element here. Dorothy walked to the front door and stepped out onto the porch. The air was cooling rapidly as the sun sank toward the mountains, and she wrapped her arms around herself. The landscape was painted in shades of gold and purple, achingly beautiful. She could hear the burble of the creek, the distant lowing of cattle, and closer, the sounds of Isaac working in the barn. She sat down on the porch steps, her skirts pooling around her, and tried to imagine her life here. Waking up in that bedroom every morning, cooking at that stove, watching the seasons change over these mountains. It felt impossible, like a story about someone else's life. "You all right?" She jumped at Isaac's voice. He had come around the side of the house, and she had been so lost in thought she had not heard him approach. "Yes, I am sorry, I was just thinking." He climbed the steps and sat down beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. "This is a good time of day. I like to sit out here sometimes and just watch the sun go down." They sat in silence for a while, watching the light fade. Dorothy found herself gradually relaxing, the quiet peace of the evening seeping into her tense muscles. "In your letters, you mentioned you like to read," Isaac said. "I am not much of a reader myself, but there is a bookshelf in town at the general store where people trade books. Margaret Wells keeps it stocked. I thought maybe we could go into town in a few days, let you meet some people and find some books you would enjoy." "That would be nice," Dorothy said. "Thank you. I want you to be happy here," Isaac said, his voice low and serious. "Or at least as happy as you can be, given that you did not exactly choose this life out of joy." Dorothy looked at him, at his profile in the fading light. "I chose to answer your advertisement. I chose to get on that train. Maybe it was not a choice born of happiness, but it was still a choice." He turned to meet her eyes. "That is a fair point. And you have been nothing but kind since I arrived. That counts for something." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Well, I am trying not to add to your list of things to be terrified about." Despite herself, Dorothy laughed, a small, startled sound. "You are not on the list. You are quite possibly the only thing here that is not on the list. I will take that as a victory." He stood and offered her his hand. "Come on. It is getting cold and you have had a long day. Let's get some supper and then you should rest." Dorothy placed her hand in his and let him pull her to her feet. They went back inside and Isaac built up the fire while Dorothy looked through the supplies in the kitchen. "I can cook," she said. "If you want me to." "Tomorrow," Isaac said. "Tonight we keep it simple. I have stew left from yesterday, just needs heating up." They ate together at the table and Dorothy found herself asking questions about the ranch, about the work, about the animals. Isaac answered everything patiently, his voice steady and calm. He told her about the cattle drives, about breaking horses, about the challenges of winters when the snow could pile up higher than a man's head. "How do you survive winters like that?" Dorothy asked, genuinely curious despite her fear. "Preparation. We stock up on supplies in the fall, make sure we have enough feed for the animals, enough firewood to last. The house is well built and holds heat well. It is hard work, but you stay busy and stay warm." He looked at her seriously. "I will not lie and say it is easy. But we will face it together." After supper, Isaac showed her how to bank the fire for the night and where everything was in case she needed it. "The guest room is made up for you," he said. "Clean sheets, extra quilts in the wardrobe if you get cold. My room is on the other side of the house, so you will have privacy." "Thank you, Isaac, for everything, for being patient with me." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was feather-light, his rough fingers surprisingly gentle. "You are my wife now, Dorothy. I may not know you well yet, but I made vows to you in my heart when I wrote those letters, just as surely as we will say them out loud when the preacher can come out from town. I mean to keep those vows, all of them, including the one about protecting you." Dorothy felt tears prick her eyes at the sincerity in his voice. "I will try to be worthy of that. You already are." He stepped back, putting proper distance between them again. "Sleep well, Dorothy. Tomorrow I will start teaching you about this place." She went to the guest room and changed into her nightgown, her movements slow and weary. The bed was comfortable, the quilts soft and warm. But as she lay in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the frontier night, sleep felt very far away. She could hear coyotes howling in the distance, an eerie sound that made her skin prickle. The wind rattled the window panes, and every creak of the house settling made her jump. She thought about Isaac sleeping on the other side of the house, about how he had promised to keep her safe, and tried to let that comfort her. Eventually, exhaustion won out over fear, and Dorothy drifted into an uneasy sleep. She woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of movement in the main room. Pale dawn light filtered through the window. For a moment, she could not remember where she was, and then it all came rushing back. Colorado. The frontier. Isaac. Dorothy dressed quickly in a simple calico dress and braided her hair, pinning it up in a practical style. When she emerged from the guest room, she found Isaac at the stove, cooking breakfast. "Good morning," he said, glancing over his shoulder at her. "I hope I did not wake you." "No, I was already stirring." She came to stand beside him. "Can I help? You can set the table if you want. Plates are in that cupboard there." They moved around each other in the kitchen, and Dorothy was surprised at how comfortable it felt, this quiet morning routine. Isaac had made eggs and bacon and biscuits, and the food was simple but good. "After breakfast, I want to show you around the property," Isaac said. "Introduce you to the horses and the cattle, show you where the creek runs, where the property lines are. You need to start learning the lay of the land." Dorothy's stomach clenched with anxiety, but she nodded. "All right." True to his word, after they had eaten and cleaned up, Isaac took her outside. The morning was cool and fresh, the air so clean it almost hurt to breathe after years of city smog. He led her first to the barn, a large, sturdy building that smelled of hay and horses. "These are my pride and joy," Isaac said, gesturing to the horses in their stalls. "This big fellow is Thunder." He patted the neck of a massive gray horse that regarded Dorothy with liquid dark eyes. "He is my main riding horse, and this pretty lady is Willow." A smaller chestnut mare stuck her head over the stall door, and Isaac scratched her nose affectionately. "They are very large," Dorothy said, staying well back. "Willow is gentle as a lamb. Come here, let me introduce you properly." Isaac held out his hand to Dorothy. She approached reluctantly, and Isaac guided her hand to Willow's nose. The horse's breath was warm against her palm, and the mare's nose was soft as velvet. Dorothy felt a tiny spark of wonder break through her fear. "See." "She would not hurt a fly," Isaac said quietly. "I am going to teach you to ride, Dorothy. Not today, but soon. You need to be able to handle a horse out here. It is important." "I am afraid I will fall off," Dorothy admitted. "You probably will at first. I did many times. But I will be right there with you, and we will start slow." He smiled at her. "Trust me." Dorothy looked into his eyes and saw only patience and determination to keep his word. "I am trying to. That is all I ask." He showed her the rest of the barn, the feed storage, the tack room with all its leather and metal. Then they walked out to the corral where several horses grazed peacefully. Isaac pointed out landmarks as they walked, teaching her to orient herself by the shape of the mountains, the curve of the creek, the position of the sun. "That peak there, the one that looks like it has a notch cut out of it, that is Mount Shivano. You can see it from almost anywhere on the property. If you ever get turned around, find that peak and you will know which direction you are facing." They walked to the creek, and Isaac showed her where the water ran clear and cold over smooth rocks. "This is good water. Safe to drink straight from the creek this far up. Down closer to town you want to be more careful, but up here it is clean." Dorothy knelt and dipped her fingers in the water. It was shockingly cold and she gasped. Isaac chuckled. "Come straight down from the snowmelt on the mountains. Cold even in the middle of summer." As they walked, Isaac pointed out tracks in the soft earth near the creek. "Deer," he said, indicating a set of split hoof prints. "They come down to drink in the evening, and these." He pointed to different tracks, larger and rounder. "Cattle. And these here are from a coyote, probably passed through last night." Dorothy stared at the tracks, trying to commit their shapes to memory. There was so much to learn, so much she needed to know to survive in this place. They spent the morning exploring the property, and Isaac was patient with her endless questions. He showed her the vegetable garden, now mostly finished for the season but with a few hardy plants still producing. He explained about the cattle, how they ranged freely over the hills but stayed within certain boundaries. "We will do a roundup in a few weeks," he said. "Bring them in closer for the winter. It is hard work, but Frank Morrison usually helps and his eldest son. Do you have family, Isaac? Dorothy asked. Besides your father, I mean. His expression closed off slightly. My mother died when I was 16. My father is still in Kansas as far as I know, but we do not correspond. I have a sister, younger than me. She married a shopkeeper and lives in Topeka. We write occasionally. He glanced at her. What about you? You said your parents had passed, but anyone else? No. I was an only child. My mother had 2 sisters, but they both died of scarlet fever when I was young. My father's family disowned him when he married my mother because she was Catholic and they were not. So it was just the 3 of us, and then just my mother and me, and then just me. She looked down at her hands. I had friends in Philadelphia, but no one close enough to stay in touch with across such a distance. So we are both alone, Isaac said quietly. Yes, I suppose we are. He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his gray eyes. Then we will have to stop being alone together. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and promise. They returned to the house for lunch, and Dorothy insisted on preparing the meal. It felt good to do something useful, something she was confident in. She made sandwiches and heated up soup, and Isaac ate with obvious appreciation. You are a good cook, he said. My mother taught me. She said a woman should know how to make a proper meal from whatever was at hand. Dorothy smiled at the memory. She could stretch a small amount of food to feed us for days when times were tight. You will do well here then. That is an important skill on a ranch. In the afternoon, Isaac needed to ride out and check on the cattle in the far pasture. I will be gone a few hours, he said. Will you be all right here alone? Dorothy wanted to say no, wanted to beg him not to leave her, but she forced herself to nod. I will be fine. I can unpack more of my things, do some cleaning. If you need anything, anything at all, ring this. He showed her a large bell mounted on a post near the porch. I will hear it and come back. After he rode away on Thunder, Dorothy stood on the porch and watched until he disappeared over a rise. The silence that settled over the ranch felt oppressive. She went back inside and tried to busy herself with domestic tasks, but every sound made her jump. The wind rattling the windows, the house creaking, a bird landing on the roof with a thump. She was washing dishes when she heard horses approaching. Her heart leaped into her throat. Isaac had said he would be gone for hours. Who could be coming? Dorothy dried her hands on a towel and went to the window, peering out carefully. 3 men on horseback were riding up to the house. They looked rough, with trail dust covering them and hard expressions on their weathered faces. Terror froze her in place. Isaac had said to ring the bell if she needed him. But what if these men meant harm? What if ringing the bell just brought Isaac into danger? One of the men dismounted and walked up to the porch. Dorothy forced herself to go to the door, opening it only a crack. Help you, she managed, trying to keep her voice steady. The man looked surprised to see her. Afternoon, madam. We are looking for Isaac Grayson. He around? He is out checking cattle. Can I give him a message? The man exchanged glances with his companions, still mounted behind him. We are just passing through, looking to see if Grayson needs any help with his roundup next month. We are hiring ourselves out as ranch hands. Dorothy did not know what to say. These could be perfectly legitimate men looking for honest work, or they could be lying. She had no way to tell the difference. I will let him know you came by, she said carefully. If you want to leave your names, tell him Pete Carson stopped by and he can find me in town at the saloon if he is interested. The man tipped his hat. Sorry to disturb you, madam. They rode away and Dorothy closed the door with shaking hands. She went to the window and watched until they were out of sight, her heart still racing. When Isaac finally returned an hour later, she nearly flew out the door to meet him. Men came by, she said quickly. 3 of them. One said his name was Pete Carson. They asked about the roundup. Isaac's expression had gone serious. What did they look like? Dorothy described them as best she could, and Isaac nodded slowly. Carson is all right. He has worked roundups before, does decent work. But you were smart to be cautious. He looked at her closely. Did they frighten you? Everything frightens me, Dorothy said honestly. But yes, being here alone when strangers rode up made me afraid. Isaac stepped closer, and this time he did not hesitate. He pulled her into his arms, holding her against his broad chest. Dorothy stiffened in surprise, but then let herself relax into his embrace. He was warm and solid and strong, and for the first time since arriving, she felt truly safe. I hate that you are afraid, Isaac said, his voice rumbling in his chest. I wish I could make it all go away instantly. You are helping, Dorothy said softly, her face pressed against his shirt. She could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong. They stood like that for a long moment before Isaac gently released her. Come on, let's get inside. I will teach you how to shoot. What? Dorothy stared at him. A gun. I am going to teach you how to handle a rifle and a pistol. You need to know how to defend yourself, Dorothy. I will not always be right here, and you need to be able to protect yourself if necessary. The thought of handling a gun terrified her almost as much as the thought of needing to use one, but she could see the logic in what Isaac was saying. All right. They spent the rest of the afternoon in shooting practice. Isaac set up targets at various distances from the house and showed her how to hold the rifle, how to aim, how to squeeze the trigger gently rather than pull. The first time she fired, the recoil knocked her back a step and the loud bang made her ears ring. You will get used to it, Isaac said. Try again. By the time the sun was setting, Dorothy's shoulder was bruised from the rifle's kick, and her hands smelled of gunpowder, but she had managed to hit the target several times. She felt exhausted and shaky, but also strangely proud. You did well, Isaac said as they walked back to the house. Better than I expected for a first time. I do not ever want to have to use it on anything living, Dorothy said. I hope you never have to, but now you know you can if you must. That night, they ate dinner together and talked more easily than they had before. Dorothy found herself telling Isaac about her life in Philadelphia, about her father's bookkeeping business and how she had helped him with the ledgers. Isaac listened with genuine interest, asking questions and seeming to truly care about her answers. You are good with numbers then? He asked. Yes, I always found them soothing in a way. They make sense. They add up correctly or they do not. There is no ambiguity. I could use help with the ranch books, Isaac admitted. I keep track of everything, but I am not very organized about it. If you wanted to take that over, it would be a help. I would like that, Dorothy said, meaning it. The idea of being useful, of having a purpose beyond just keeping house, appealed to her. Then it is yours. As they were cleaning up after dinner, Dorothy worked up her courage to ask something that had been on her mind. Isaac, when are we supposed to marry? Officially, I mean. He dried the plate he was holding carefully before answering. The circuit preacher comes through Salida once a month. He will be back in about 2 weeks. I figured we could go into town that day and have the ceremony at the church. Nothing fancy, just us and a couple of witnesses. He glanced at her. Unless you want something different, no, that sounds fine. I just wanted to know what to expect. Are you worried about it? He asked gently. A little. Everything is happening so fast, even though we have been writing for months. It still feels like I am living someone else's life. Isaac dried his hands and turned to face her fully. I want you to know something. After we marry officially, I still will not rush you into anything you are not ready for. We will keep taking our time, keep getting to know each other. Marriage is a piece of paper, but trust and caring, those take time to build. Dorothy felt emotion swell in her chest. "How are you so patient? So understanding?" "Because I know what it is like to be afraid," he said simply. "My father ruled our house with fear and anger. I swore I would never be that kind of man. And I see you trying so hard to be brave, and it makes me want to be the kind of person worthy of that bravery." Without thinking, Dorothy stepped forward and hugged him. Isaac's arms came around her immediately, holding her close but gently, as though she were something precious. They stood like that in the lamplight, and Dorothy felt something shift inside her. Not love, not yet. But perhaps the beginning of it, the first tender shoots breaking through frozen ground. The days fell into a rhythm. Each morning, Isaac took her on walks around the property, teaching her to read the land, to recognize tracks and signs. He taught her the names of plants, which ones were safe and which ones were poisonous. He showed her how to draw water from the well, how to tend the chickens and collect eggs. Dorothy threw herself into learning with a determination that seemed to surprise and please Isaac. She kept the house immaculately clean, cooked good meals, and spent her afternoons working on organizing the ranch records into proper ledgers. In the evenings, they sat together by the fire, sometimes talking, sometimes reading, sometimes just enjoying the comfortable silence. A week after her arrival, Isaac declared she was ready to start learning to ride. Dorothy's stomach churned with anxiety as he led Willow out of the barn, already saddled. "She is the gentlest horse I have," Isaac said. "I would trust her with a child, and I am trusting her with you." He helped Dorothy mount, his hand steadying her as she awkwardly swung her leg over the saddle. The ground looked terrifyingly far away, and the horse felt like a barely controlled force beneath her. "I am going to lead her," Isaac said, taking the reins. "You just sit there and get used to the feeling. Hold onto the saddle horn if you need to." They walked slowly around the corral, Isaac talking to her in that steady, calm voice, telling her to relax, to move with the horse instead of fighting against it. After a while, Dorothy felt some of her terror ease. Willow was indeed gentle, her gait smooth and even. "You are doing great," Isaac said, and the pride in his voice made Dorothy sit a little straighter. They practiced every day, and gradually Dorothy became more comfortable in the saddle. Isaac taught her how to hold the reins, how to signal the horse to walk or stop or turn. By the end of the second week, she could walk Willow around the corral on her own, without Isaac leading. "Soon we will ride out together," Isaac said. "I want to show you the high meadow. It is one of the most beautiful places on the property." The day before they were supposed to go into town for the wedding, Dorothy was hanging laundry when she heard Isaac shout from the barn. The sound was sharp with alarm, and she dropped the shirt she was holding and ran toward the sound. She found Isaac in one of the stalls with Thunder. The big gray horse was favoring his front left leg, and Isaac was running his hands over it carefully. "What happened?" Dorothy asked. "Not sure. He must have stepped wrong or kicked at something. His leg is swelling." Isaac's face was tight with worry. "This is bad timing. I need to ride into town tomorrow, and Thunder is my strongest horse. Can you take one of the others?" "I could, but they are not as reliable on the mountain trails." He straightened, wiping sweat from his forehead. "It will be all right. Thunder just needs rest. I will take Ace instead." But Dorothy could see the concern in his eyes. Thunder was clearly his favorite, his most trusted mount. That evening, Isaac checked on Thunder again. The swelling had gone down some, but the horse was still limping. Isaac came back to the house looking troubled. "What if we postpone the wedding?" Dorothy suggested. "Until Thunder is better. The preacher will not be back for another month after tomorrow." Isaac shook his head. "No, we will go as planned. Ace will manage fine." That night, Dorothy lay in bed in the guest room and thought about the fact that tomorrow she would be officially married. Mrs. Dorothy Grayson. She had been signing her letters with that name for months, but tomorrow it would be real. She found that she was not as afraid as she had expected to be. Over the past 2 weeks, Isaac had proven himself to be exactly what he had promised: patient, kind, protective. He had not once pressured her or made her feel unsafe. In fact, she was starting to feel something she had not expected to feel. She was starting to care for him. The next morning, Dorothy dressed in her best gown, a deep green dress with small white flowers embroidered on the bodice. She pinned her hair up carefully and looked at herself in the small mirror. She looked pale but composed, like a woman going to her wedding instead of her doom. Isaac was waiting in the main room, dressed in clean clothes with his hair combed back. He looked handsome and nervous, which Dorothy found oddly comforting. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice rough. "Thank you. You look very nice as well." They rode into town together in the wagon, Ace pulling it without complaint. The morning was beautiful, clear, and cool, with the mountains standing sharp against a brilliant blue sky. They talked little on the journey, both lost in their own thoughts. Salida was busy when they arrived, with people going about their Saturday business. Isaac drove the wagon to the small white church at the end of the main street and helped Dorothy down. "Are you ready?" he asked, his gray eyes searching hers. "Yes," Dorothy said, and found that she meant it. The preacher was a kind-faced older man named Reverend Peters. Margaret Wells from the general store was there to serve as witness, along with her husband Henry. The ceremony was simple and brief. Dorothy spoke her vows in a clear voice, promising to love and honor Isaac Grayson. Isaac's voice was steady and sure as he promised the same to her, his eyes never leaving her face. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac leaned down and kissed her gently, just a soft brush of his lips against hers. It was Dorothy's first kiss, and her heart fluttered wildly in her chest. "Congratulations," Margaret said warmly, hugging Dorothy. "You have got yourself a good man there. Isaac has always been one of the finest people in this territory." They signed the marriage certificate, and then Isaac tucked Dorothy's hand into his arm. "Mrs. Grayson," he said, his voice filled with quiet joy. "How does it feel?" "Strange," Dorothy admitted, "but good strange. I will take that." They spent a few hours in town, Isaac introducing Dorothy to more people and stopping at the general store for supplies. Dorothy found herself relaxing among the friendly faces, feeling less like an outsider. Several of the women invited her to a quilting circle that met twice a month, and she accepted gratefully. On the ride back to the ranch, Isaac was more talkative than usual, telling her stories about the town, about some of the characters who lived there. Dorothy found herself laughing at his descriptions, seeing a lighter side of him that he had not shown before. "You seem happy," she observed. "I am," Isaac said simply. "I have been alone a long time, Dorothy. Having you here, having someone to share things with, it means more than I can say." "I am glad I came," Dorothy said, and realized with a start that she meant it. "I was so terrified at first, and I am still learning, but I am glad I am here, with you." Isaac reached over and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "That makes me happier than you know." When they reached the ranch, the sun was starting to set. Isaac helped Dorothy down from the wagon, but this time he did not immediately release her. He stood looking down at her, his hand still at her waist. "I know we said we would take things slow," he said quietly, "and we will. But I want you to know that I care for you, Dorothy, more with each day that passes." "I care for you too," Dorothy whispered. "I did not expect to. I thought this would just be a practical arrangement, but you have been so kind, so patient. You have made me feel safe when everything else feels dangerous. I care for you very much, Isaac." He pulled her close and kissed her again, longer this time, his lips warm and gentle against hers. Dorothy felt heat bloom through her body, a feeling both strange and wonderful. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing harder, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "Are you ready to stop sleeping in separate rooms?" he asked. "Because I would very much like my wife beside me, but only if you want that too." Dorothy's heart was racing, but it was not fear she felt now. "Yes, I want that." That night, Dorothy moved her things into the main bedroom. She changed into her nightgown with shaking hands, both nervous and excited. When she emerged from behind the privacy screen, Isaac was sitting on the edge of the bed, watching her with an expression that made her feel warm all over. "Come here," he said gently. Dorothy walked to him, and he pulled her down to sit beside him. "We will take this at your pace," he said. "Nothing happens that you do not want." "I want to be close to you," Dorothy said honestly. "I am nervous, but I trust you." Isaac smiled and cupped her face in his hands, kissing her softly. "Then let me show you how much I care for you." He was gentle and patient, guiding her through the intimacy of their first night together with tender care. Every time Dorothy tensed or seemed uncertain, Isaac slowed down, talking to her quietly, making sure she was comfortable. When they finally came together as husband and wife, Dorothy felt something shift in her heart. This was more than just physical. This was connection, trust, the beginning of real love. Afterward, they lay tangled together under the quilts, Isaac's arms wrapped around her. Dorothy rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Are you all right?" Isaac asked, stroking her hair. "More than all right," Dorothy said softly. "I feel safe. I feel like I am finally home." She felt him press a kiss to the top of her head. "You are home. This is where you belong. With me." Dorothy snuggled closer to him, and for the first time since leaving Philadelphia, she felt no fear. Just peace and contentment and the warm glow of growing love. The weeks turned into months. Autumn deepened, painting the mountains in brilliant gold and red. Isaac and Dorothy fell into a comfortable partnership, working together to run the ranch. Dorothy became more confident on horseback and started riding out with Isaac to check on the cattle. He taught her to read the weather, to know when a storm was coming by the smell of the air and the behavior of the animals. The roundup came, and true to Isaac's word, Frank Morrison and his son came to help. Dorothy met Sarah Morrison, Frank's wife, and the two women became fast friends. Sarah was a sturdy, practical woman who had been on the frontier for 15 years, and she took Dorothy under her wing, teaching her all sorts of practical skills for frontier life. "You are doing well," Sarah told her one day as they worked together in Dorothy's kitchen, preserving the last of the garden vegetables. "I have seen plenty of Eastern women come out here and either go mad or go back east within 6 months. You have got grit." "I do not feel very gritty most of the time," Dorothy admitted. "I still get scared." "Being scared is not the same as being weak. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is doing what needs to be done despite the fear." Sarah patted her hand. "Besides, you have got Isaac looking out for you. That man would walk through fire for you." Dorothy knew it was true. Isaac's devotion to her was evident in everything he did. He still checked on her constantly, making sure she was comfortable, that she had everything she needed. He surprised her with small gifts when he went to town, a new book or a pretty hair ribbon. In the evenings, they sat together by the fire, and Isaac would read aloud to her, his deep voice bringing the words to life. Their physical relationship had deepened as well. Dorothy had overcome her initial shyness and now took pleasure in their intimate moments. Isaac was a generous and attentive lover, always making sure she was satisfied. She found herself looking forward to the nights in his arms, to the way he made her feel cherished and desired. Winter arrived with a vengeance in late November. The first big storm dumped 3 feet of snow on the ranch overnight, transforming the landscape into a frozen wonderland. Dorothy woke to find the world outside the window completely white, and her first instinct was panic. "Hey, hey, it is all right," Isaac said, pulling her close when he saw her frightened expression. "This is normal. We are prepared. We have food and firewood and everything we need." And they did. The house was warm and cozy, the pantry well stocked. Isaac had to go out several times a day to check on the animals and break ice on the water troughs, but he never complained. Dorothy kept the house warm and made hot meals, and they settled into the enforced closeness of winter. On Christmas Eve, Dorothy surprised Isaac with a gift. She had been secretly working on it for weeks, a shirt she had sewn from fabric she had traded for in town. It was made to fit his large frame with careful stitching and attention to detail. Isaac stared at the shirt with an expression of wonder. "You made this? For me?" "I wanted to give you something," Dorothy said, suddenly shy. "You have given me so much." He pulled the shirt on over his undershirt and it fit perfectly. Then he turned to her and pulled something from his pocket. "I have something for you, too." It was a small carved wooden box, and when Dorothy opened it, she found a delicate silver necklace inside with a small pendant in the shape of a mountain. "Mount Shavano," Isaac said. "So you will always be able to find your way home." Dorothy threw her arms around him, tears streaming down her face. "I love you," she said, the words bursting out of her before she could think about them. "I love you so much, Isaac." He held her tight, his voice thick with emotion. "I love you too, Dorothy. I think I have loved you since you stepped off that train looking so terrified and brave at the same time." They made love that night with a new intensity. Each touch and kiss, a declaration of the feelings they had finally spoken aloud. Dorothy fell asleep in her husband's arms, feeling more content than she had ever imagined possible. The winter was long and hard, but Dorothy found she did not mind it as much as she had feared. She and Isaac were snowed in for days at a time, and they filled the hours with conversation, with learning about each other, with building the foundation of a life together. Isaac taught her to play chess using a set his mother had given him. Dorothy read aloud from her books while Isaac worked on mending tack or carving small figures from wood. When spring finally arrived in April, melting the snow and bringing green back to the valley, Dorothy felt like she had lived a whole lifetime in the months since arriving in Colorado. She stood on the porch one morning, watching the sunrise paint the mountains pink and gold, and marveled at how much had changed. Isaac came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on top of her head. "What are you thinking about?" "About how scared I was when I first got here, about how this felt like the most foreign, dangerous place in the world." She turned in his arms to face him. "And now it feels like the only place I want to be." "No regrets?" he asked, smiling. "Not a single one." Spring brought new life to the ranch. The cattle had calves, the horses had foals, and Dorothy discovered she was pregnant. She told Isaac one evening in late May, her hands shaking as she placed his palm against her still flat stomach. "You are sure?" he asked, his voice filled with wonder. "The doctor in town confirmed it yesterday when you were meeting with Frank. I am about 3 months along." Isaac's face went through a series of emotions, joy and fear and love all chasing each other across his features. "A baby. We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Dorothy asked. "Happy does not begin to cover it." He kissed her deeply. "Terrified too, if I am being honest, but mostly happy." As Dorothy's pregnancy progressed through the summer, Isaac became even more protective than he had been before. He insisted she not do any heavy work, that she rest often, that she eat well. Dorothy bore his fussing with good humor, secretly pleased by how much he cared. Sarah Morrison came over regularly to check on her and give advice, having had 4 children of her own. "Boys are easier to birth but harder to raise," she said with a laugh. "Girls are the opposite." Dorothy's belly grew round and full as autumn returned to the valley. She watched the leaves turn gold again, marking a full year since she had arrived on that train, terrified and alone. Now she stood on the porch of her home, her hand resting on the child growing inside her, watching her husband work with the horses in the corral. She felt a sense of peace so profound it brought tears to her eyes. Isaac noticed her standing there and waved, his face breaking into the warm smile he reserved just for her. She waved back, her heart full to overflowing with love for this man who had kept every promise he had made to her. The baby came in early January, during a break in the winter storms. Sarah Morrison and the doctor from town were both there, and Isaac paced the main room like a caged animal while Dorothy labored in the bedroom. When the baby's first cry rang out, Isaac burst through the door despite Sarah's protests. "A boy," Sarah announced, placing the tiny bundled infant in Dorothy's arms. "A healthy, strong boy." Isaac sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his son with an expression of absolute awe. "He is perfect," he whispered. "He has your eyes," Dorothy said, exhausted but happy. The baby did indeed have gray eyes like his father and a shock of dark hair. "What should we name him?" Isaac asked. They had discussed names for months but had never quite settled on one. Now, looking at her son's tiny face, Dorothy knew. "James," she said. "After my father, James Henry Grayson." "James Henry Grayson," Isaac repeated, trying it out. "I like it." He reached out and gently touched his son's tiny hand, and the baby's fingers wrapped around Isaac's large finger. "Hello, James. I am your father, and I am going to teach you everything I know." Those first weeks with a newborn were exhausting and wonderful. Dorothy had never felt so tired or so happy. Isaac was a devoted father, getting up with her for the nighttime feedings, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with James when the baby was fussy. Dorothy fell in love with him all over again, seeing him be so gentle with their tiny son. As winter gave way to spring again, James grew and thrived. He was a happy baby, quick to smile and laugh. Dorothy would sit on the porch with him, pointing out the mountains and the horses, telling him stories about how she had come to this place and found a home. One afternoon in late April, as Dorothy sat on the porch with James sleeping in her arms, Isaac came and sat beside her. He put his arm around her shoulders and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun move across the sky. "I was thinking," Isaac said after a while, "maybe we should add on to the house. Another bedroom or two, in case James wants brothers or sisters someday." Dorothy smiled. "I would like that. A house full of children and noise and life. A far cry from the quiet ranch it was before you arrived." "Do you miss the quiet?" Dorothy asked. Isaac looked at her, then at the baby in her arms, his expression tender. "Not for a single second." The years passed with the changing seasons. The house was expanded to include 2 more bedrooms. James was joined by a little sister they named Catherine Rose when he was 2, and then another boy they called Daniel Thomas 3 years after that. The ranch prospered under Isaac and Dorothy's joint management, growing to include more cattle and horses, more land. Dorothy became a fixture in the Salida community, known for her kindness and her sharp mind with numbers. She helped other families with their accounting and served on the church committee. She was no longer the terrified Eastern woman who had stepped off the train in 1878. She was a rancher's wife, a mother, a valued member of the community. But some things never changed. Isaac still checked on her constantly, still touched her whenever he passed by, still looked at her with love shining in his eyes. And Dorothy still felt safe in his arms, still knew that he would keep his promise to protect her always. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac took Dorothy on a picnic to the high meadow he had promised to show her all those years ago. They left the children with Sarah Morrison for the afternoon and rode up into the mountains, following trails that were now familiar to Dorothy. The meadow was beautiful, filled with wildflowers and surrounded by towering pines. They spread out a blanket and ate the lunch Dorothy had packed, then lay back and watched clouds drift across the blue sky. "You remember when I first brought you to the ranch?" Isaac asked, his fingers entwined with hers. "Of course. I was so frightened I could barely breathe. And now look at you. You can shoot, ride, run a ranch, birth babies. You are the strongest person I know." Dorothy propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "I am only strong because you made me feel safe enough to learn to be strong. You kept your promise, Isaac. Every single day for 10 years, you have kept me safe." "It has been the greatest honor of my life," Isaac said seriously. He sat up and pulled her into his lap, wrapping his arms around her. "I love you more now than I did the day we married, more than I thought it was possible to love another person." "I love you too," Dorothy said, resting her head against his shoulder. "I came here expecting survival, maybe companionship if I was lucky. I never expected to find home, family, love. You gave me all of that." They sat there in the high meadow, holding each other as the afternoon sun warmed them. Around them, the mountains stood eternal and strong, and Dorothy thought about how they had become a metaphor for her marriage. Solid, enduring, beautiful even in their harshness. As they rode back down to the ranch that evening, Dorothy looked out over the valley and saw the life she had built there. The house where her children slept safe and warm. The barn where the horses nickered in their stalls. The land that had seemed so terrifying once and now felt like it was part of her very soul. And beside her, strong and steady, rode the man who had promised to keep her safe and had never broken that promise. The man who had given her not just protection but partnership, not just security but love. Dorothy Grayson was no longer afraid of the frontier. She was part of it now, woven into its fabric as surely as the grass was woven into the valley floor. And she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with Isaac beside her, just as she had faced every challenge since that day she stepped off the train in Salida. The frontier had not defeated her. With Isaac's love and protection, it had made her stronger than she ever knew she could be. And that, Dorothy thought as they rode toward home, was the greatest gift of all. Years continued to unfold like the seasons, each bringing its own joys and challenges. James grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved working with the horses like his father. Catherine was spirited and fearless, always climbing trees and getting into mischief. Daniel was gentle and loved animals, spending hours watching the cattle and learning to read the weather from Isaac. Dorothy watched her children grow with a sense of profound gratitude. They knew nothing of the fear that had once paralyzed their mother. They ran free across the ranch land, confident and capable, and Dorothy understood that this was her true victory over the terror that had once consumed her. Her children would never know that fear because she had overcome it. When James turned 16, Isaac began teaching him seriously about running the ranch. Dorothy would watch them working together, her husband and her son, and feel her heart swell with pride. Isaac was patient with James, just as he had always been patient with her, and James soaked up the knowledge eagerly. Catherine at 14 wanted to learn everything her brother learned, and to Isaac's credit, he taught her just the same. "She has as much right to know this land as any son would," he said, when Dorothy expressed surprise at him teaching Catherine to break horses. "This ranch will belong to all of them someday." Daniel was 11 and still figuring out his place in the world, but he showed signs of being the smartest of the three, always asking questions, always wanting to understand not just how things worked but why. One evening, as Dorothy and Isaac sat on the porch watching the sunset while their children did evening chores, Isaac took her hand. "I have been thinking about something," he said. "What is that?" "About how lucky I am. I could have answered a dozen different letters from women back east. But I answered yours, and you could have answered a dozen different advertisements, but you answered mine. What are the odds that we would find each other across all that distance?" Dorothy smiled. "I used to think it was chance, luck, but now I think maybe it was always meant to be. Like the mountains were waiting for me to find them, and you were waiting for me to find you." "That is a nice way to think about it," Isaac said softly. They sat in comfortable silence, and Dorothy reflected on the path that had brought her here. The grief of losing her parents, the desperation that had driven her to answer that advertisement, the terror of arriving in a world so foreign to everything she knew. And then the slow, steady journey from fear to trust to love. "You ever miss Philadelphia?" Isaac asked. "No," Dorothy said honestly. "Sometimes I remember it, certain streets or buildings or the sound of the city, but I do not miss it. That was another life, another person. I like who I am here much better." "Who are you here?" Isaac asked, a smile playing at his lips. Dorothy thought about it. "I am someone strong, someone capable. A mother, a wife, a partner, someone who belongs to this land as much as it belongs to me, someone who is not afraid anymore." Isaac raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You were always that person. You just needed the space to discover it." "I needed you," Dorothy corrected. "I needed someone to keep me safe while I learned to keep myself safe. You gave me that, Isaac. You gave me everything." As the sun sank behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, their children came back from the barn. James was carrying a bucket of milk. Catherine was covered in hay from helping fork feed to the horses. And Daniel was chattering excitedly about a new calf that had been born that afternoon. They all trooped into the house, and Dorothy began preparing dinner while Isaac helped the children clean up. The house was filled with noise and laughter and life, so different from the silent, empty building it had been before Dorothy arrived. After dinner, as had become their tradition, they gathered in the main room. Isaac read aloud from a book while Dorothy mended clothes and the children worked on various projects. Catherine was practicing her stitching, though she did it with obvious impatience. James was sketching horses in a journal. Daniel was building something with small pieces of wood, his tongue poking out in concentration. Dorothy looked around at her family, at the life they had built together in this house, on this land, and felt a sense of completion. This was what she had been meant to find. Not just survival, not just safety, but love and family and home. When the children had finally been herded off to bed, Dorothy and Isaac prepared for sleep. As they lay in their bed in the darkness of the room, Isaac pulled Dorothy close. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For taking a chance on a letter from a stranger. For being brave enough to come to a place that terrified you. For giving me a family and a life worth living. For loving me." Dorothy turned in his arms so she could look at him, even though the darkness made it hard to see his features. "I should be thanking you. You saved my life, Isaac, not just by offering me a home when I had nowhere else to go, but by showing me that I was stronger than I thought. By keeping your promise to keep me safe until I could feel safe on my own. By loving me when I did not think anyone ever would again." "I will always love you," Isaac said, his voice rough with emotion. "Until the day I die and beyond that if I can manage it." "Then we are both lucky," Dorothy whispered, "because I will love you just as long." They made love that night with the tenderness of long familiarity, knowing exactly how to please each other, finding joy in the intimacy they had built over years of marriage. Afterward, Dorothy drifted off to sleep feeling safe and loved and home. The years continued their steady march. The children grew and eventually began lives of their own. James fell in love with the daughter of a neighboring rancher and married her when he was 21, building a house on the far edge of the Grayson property. Catherine, determined to prove that women could do anything men could do, went to Denver to attend school and became a teacher, though she returned to Salida every summer. Daniel surprised everyone by developing a talent for veterinary medicine, studying with the doctor in town, and eventually taking over care of animals for ranchers throughout the valley. As Dorothy and Isaac moved into their later years, the ranch remained the center of their world. They added a front room to the house where their grandchildren could play when they visited. Dorothy's hair turned gray, and Isaac's face lined with years of sun and wind, but the love between them only grew stronger. On their 30th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Their children and grandchildren filled the house with noise and laughter, and Dorothy watched it all with a heart so full she thought it might burst. That evening, after everyone had left and she and Isaac were alone again, they walked out to stand by the creek, the same creek where Isaac had shown her those animal tracks so many years ago when she had been so terrified of everything. "We built something good, did we not?" Isaac asked, his arm around her shoulders. "We built something wonderful," Dorothy agreed. "I kept my promise," Isaac said, and there was satisfaction in his voice. "I kept you safe, like I said I would." Dorothy leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body as familiar to her now as her own. "You did more than that. You taught me how to keep myself safe, how to be strong, how to love this land and this life, how to not be afraid." They stood there as darkness fell, and the stars began to appear, brilliant points of light in the vast Colorado sky. Dorothy thought about the frightened young woman who had stepped off that train in Salida 30 years ago, and she felt nothing but compassion for her. That woman had not known what she was capable of, had not known that fear could be transformed into strength, that loneliness could become love. "I love you, Dorothy Grayson," Isaac said, his voice steady and sure as it had always been. "I love you, Isaac Grayson," Dorothy replied. "Thank you for keeping your promise. Thank you for letting me." They walked back to the house together, their steps in perfect rhythm after so many years of walking side by side. The house welcomed them with its warmth and light, and Dorothy felt the truth settle deep in her bones. She was home. She was safe. She was loved. And she had never been happier in her entire life. The frontier that had once terrified her had become the foundation of everything good in her life. The cowboy who had promised to keep her safe had become her partner, her love, her home. And Dorothy Zimmerman Grayson, who had once been afraid of everything, had learned that with love and trust and determination, even the most frightened heart could learn to be brave.